When Stephen first moved in with my family, it felt like everything had shifted in an instant. Our relationship, if you could call it that, had always been strained. He was my best friend's younger brother, a kid I never quite understood. We didn't get along. Hell, we barely tolerated each other. We'd been thrown together for family events, social gatherings, but our interactions had always been distant, laced with sarcastic comments and awkward silences. But when his parents got divorced, everything changed. His mother moved to another state, and his father was too busy to offer much stability. So, Stephen moved in with us. I remember the first night, the sound of his suitcase dropping onto the floor of the guest room, followed by the muffled voice of my mother as she tried to make him feel at home. It felt off, like something was in the air that none of us could quite name. At first, I kept my distance. I didn't want him here. I didn't want him under my roof, disrupting the quiet routine of my life. But he was persistent, and somehow, we began to share more moments together. We exchanged glances in the hallway or sit across from each other at the dinner table, awkwardly avoiding eye contact. And then, one night, something happened that I didn't expect. It started with a simple comment, a passing remark during a late-night conversation. He was sitting on the couch in the living room, staring blankly at the television screen. I had just come from the kitchen, a drink in hand, when he said something that made my heart skip a beat. "You know, I never understood why you hated me so much," Stephen said, his voice low, almost wistful. "I never did anything to you." I froze. His words hit me in a way I wasn't prepared for. We'd never talked about it, how the distance between us had always been there, how the tension had lingered like a heavy fog. But now, here we were, on opposite ends of the room, confronting it. "I didn't hate you," I said, my voice softer than I intended. "I just didn't know how to deal with you. We were so different." He nodded slowly, as if he understood. "Yeah, I get that. But now it's different, isn't it? Things feel different between us." I didn't respond at first. He was right, though. Something had shifted. I could feel it in the air, the way his presence had begun to settle in my bones. Our moments together had started to feel less like obligation and more like an unspoken connection. Then, without warning, he stood up and walked toward me. There was a new intensity in his eyes, something raw and unspoken. The air between us seemed charged, thick with a tension neither of us knew how to handle. "Do you ever wonder what it would be like if we didn't fight it?" Stephen's voice was barely a whisper, his breath catching as he spoke. I swallowed, my heart hammering in my chest. I had no idea what he meant, but the way his eyes were locked on mine, the way his body was so close to mine, it was like something inside me snapped. I couldn't look away. "Stephen," I started, but the words didn't come. The room felt smaller now, the silence stretching between us. He was so close that I could feel his breath on my skin, his presence overwhelming. And in that moment, everything changed. The awkwardness was gone, replaced by something else. Something I couldn't name, but couldn't ignore. Before I knew it, I was kissing him. His lips were soft, tentative at first, but then they deepened, urgent. I had no idea how it happened, no explanation for why we had crossed that line, but I couldn't stop. My hands moved to his back, pulling him closer, feeling the warmth of his skin through the thin fabric of his shirt. His body was pressed against mine, and I could feel his heartbeat, erratic, in time with mine. The kiss was electric, charged with everything we'd been holding back for so long. It was wrong, it was dangerous, but it was also undeniable. We pulled back, breathing heavily, our foreheads pressed together. This is crazy, I whispered, my hand still on his body, as if I couldn't bring myself to pull away. Stephen laughed softly, a breathless sound. Yeah, but it feels real. I closed my eyes, trying to make sense of the whirlwind of emotions crashing over me. Guilt, desire, excitement, they were all tangled up inside me, fighting for control. I'm not sure I can do this, I said, my voice shaky. He took a step back, his gaze still intense. I don't want to rush anything, but I can't pretend like this isn't happening. And that was the truth. We couldn't pretend anymore. Whatever this was between us, whatever had been building for so long, it was real. And neither of us knew how to navigate it. Over the next few weeks, the tension between us only grew. There were stolen glances, quiet touches when no one was looking, and conversations that lingered longer than they should have. We never spoke about what had happened at night, but it was always there, hanging between us like an unspoken promise. I could feel myself getting closer to him, in ways I couldn't fully understand. He was still my best friend's little brother, the kid I'd resented for so long. But now, every touch, every whisper, every moment we shared felt like it was unraveling the thread of that resentment. And then one night, it happened again. Only this time, there was no hesitation. No pulling back. We were in my room, the door closed behind us, the sound of the city muffled by the thick walls. Stephen stood near my desk, his back to me, his hands running through his hair. I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his breath hitched when I moved closer. Brandon, he said, his voice low, hesitant. I didn't give him a chance to finish. I reached out and pulled him into a kiss. This time, there were no words, no questions. Just the feel of his lips against mine, the urgency of it all. Everything about it felt like it was out of control. We were no longer testing boundaries. We were crossing them. I knew there would be consequences, that this could never stay between us. But in that moment, none of that mattered. All that mattered was the way he felt in my arms, the way his body fit perfectly against mine, as if we had always been meant to be here, like this. The days after that night felt like they were suspended in a haze. Every moment with Stephen felt heavy with meaning. It was as if the world had tilted slightly, and we were both hanging off the edge, unsure whether to let go or climb back to solid ground. Every glance between us felt loaded, charged with something neither of us was fully prepared to confront. We didn't talk about that night. Not directly. But there were moments. Little moments that spoke louder than any words could. There was the way his hand would brush against mine when we were in the kitchen, the touch lingering a little longer than it should have. How his eyes would search mine across the room, like he was trying to read me, trying to figure out if I felt the same pull he did. I could feel him watching me at times, his gaze never quite leaving me. And whenever our eyes met, there was that flicker of something I couldn't ignore. That was the hardest part. Not knowing what would happen next. But also knowing that, despite the uncertainty, I couldn't stop. I couldn't stop thinking about him. One afternoon, a few days after the kiss, we were both home alone. My family had gone out, and we were left in the silence of the house. It should have been normal, just another day spent together. But it wasn't. There was something different in the air, something that made my pulse race every time I caught sight of him. I found him in the living room, sitting on the couch, a book in his hands, but he wasn't really reading. He was staring at the pages, lost in thought. As I stepped into the room, I saw his gaze flicker up to me, and that familiar tension wrapped around us. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual, but my voice was hoarse, betraying my nerves. He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Hey, what's up?" I took a deep breath, stepping closer. Nothing much. Just wanted to check in. We've both been kinda avoiding this, haven't we? Stephen's lips parted slightly, as if he was about to say something, but then he fell silent. It was as if he knew what I meant, but he was waiting for me to say it first, to acknowledge the unspoken thing between us. I took another step closer, until I was standing right in front of him. My heart was pounding in my chest, and the air between us felt thick. We can't keep pretending like nothing happened, I said quietly, my voice shaking slightly. He swallowed, eyes intense. I don't want to pretend. His words hung in the air, and I felt my body react before my mind caught up. Slowly, cautiously, I reached for him, my fingers grazing his arm. He didn't pull away. In fact, he leaned into my touch, his breath hitching as if he had been waiting for this moment too. When I cupped his face, pulling him gently toward me, everything felt right. His lips met mine, soft and tentative at first, but the more we kissed, the more urgent it became. The kiss deepened, and I felt a fire ignite in my chest. It wasn't just physical, it was everything. The way he fit against me, the way our lips moved together like we had done this 1,000 times before. There was no more hesitation. No more questions. I pulled him onto the couch, our bodies tumbling together in a rush. My hands roamed over him, as if I needed to reassure myself that this was real, that he was really here, with me. His skin was warm under my touch, and the feeling of him beneath me made my heart race. Stephen's hands were in my hair, pulling me closer, as if he couldn't get enough. I could feel his breath against my skin, the way he shivered when I kissed his neck, and it sent a thrill through me. I couldn't stop. I didn't want to stop. We didn't talk much after that. Our lips, our bodies, did the talking for us. There were no words for what we were doing, for what we were feeling. But that didn't matter. The only thing that mattered was the connection between us, the way we both seemed to fit perfectly in each other's arms. Eventually, we came up for air, breathing heavily, our foreheads resting against each other. God! I whispered, my voice raw. This feels so right, Stephen. I don't know what this is, but it feels right. He nodded, his hands gently tracing the lines of my back. I don't know what it is either, Brandon. But I can't stop thinking about you. The words felt like a promise, a declaration of something that neither of us could deny anymore. We were standing on the edge of something that was both terrifying and exhilarating. And yet, for the first time in a long time, I felt alive. As we lay there, wrapped in each other's arms, I could feel the weight of everything pressing down on me. The guilt, the confusion, the fear of what our family might think if they ever found out. But there was also something else, a sense of rightness, of peace. I had never thought that I could feel this way about Stephen. Never imagined that the resentment, the awkwardness, would turn into something like this. But here we were, tangled up in each other, both of us unsure of where it would lead, but knowing that we couldn't walk away now. The rest of the night was quiet, but not uncomfortable. It was as if we had finally found a rhythm, a way to exist together in a way that made sense for us. We held each other, whispered softly, and let our hearts guide us through the storm of emotions we were both experiencing. But even as I lay next to him, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The tension between us, the desire, had only just begun to unravel. And I didn't know what would happen next, but I knew one thing for certain: we couldn't go back.